people will take one of those offers that didn't close in the past. Like, well, I got an offer for this amount, so it must be worth that much. I'm like, not in any way, shape, or form. Just because someone submits an offer does not mean it's going to close. An offer is not a closed deal. The way to avoid a deal falling through, it really comes down to keeping your foot on the gas pedal throughout the entire selling process. We sell 75% of our deals for a reason.
Explain to the audience, what is the difference between a business broker, an M&A advisor, an investment banker?
I would say investment bankers typically.
All right, welcome back to The Formula. I'm Peter Roth, and I get founders who built big things to expose their secrets that made them rich. So grab a pen. My guest today is Joey Lieber, the man who closes a business deal every 3 days. As head of FBX Brokers, his team averages 125 closed deals per year, a pace most brokerages never touch. He's also on a mission to expose a dirty industry secret: brokers who deliberately inflate valuations just to win listings, and then they let the market crush the seller's expectations. So today, I'm going to get his exact playbook for what makes a business actually sellable versus the one that just rots on the market. Joey, welcome to The Formula. Great to have you here.
It would have me. I'm excited to touch base today. I've seen
Yeah,
your content. I know you're making waves in the call center space and doing a lot of really good work. So I'm excited to talk.
that's great, man. Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of your stuff around too. So, man, your team, you guys are closing 125 deals a year. That's pretty bananas. That's like what? That's like one every 3 days. So, like, how did you move a brokerage that moves at that breakneck speed?
So, my role in the brokerage is I'm the coordinator for the whole firm. So, there's two managing partners who I work under. One name is Jason, up is Herb, and then we have 26 brokers on our team. So, you figure 26 brokers, that's a couple of deals per broker per year. So, kind of checks out. We just are. I think last I checked, we were the largest not franchise brokerage in Florida. Excluding like the Sun Belts and the trans roles and all those franchise ones, we're pretty much the largest. And so, I think in terms of 125 deals a year, I think that this comes down to we have a decently sized team.
Yeah.
We have a whole internal marketing engine that, my job is I handle all new opportunities. So I'm talking to business owners all day, every day. And, you know,
Yeah.
we probably disqualify like 90% of businesses that we speak to when it comes to selling them. So we speak to a pretty high volume of businesses. And so it's just the nature of the size of our team and, how long we've been doing this.
That's interesting. So let me ask you a question, because you mentioned is it you guys primarily do sell side, right?
Yeah. So we're a sell side brokerage. So the business owner is our client. We don't do a ton of buy side mandates or anything like that. We're just mainly focused on the sell side.
Now, if you're a business owner and you're looking to sell or you're looking to buy a business, would your advice be to that person that you should stick with a brokerage that focuses on buy side or sell side for your particular use case, and don't go to one that does both?
So the thing about a buy side brokerage versus sell side brokerage is a buy side brokerage is sort of at odds with a sell side brokerage. Maybe that's not the best way to put that. The incentives are different. So the thing about buy side and sell side is that by definition, buy side wants to buy a business for as low as possible, and
Yeah.
sell side wants to sell a business for as much as possible. So if you as a seller go to a buy side brokerage, just because there's no fee, by definition, their incentives are not in line with you getting the highest and best outcome. I was actually just speaking to a potential client who had who had gone to a buy side brokerage who advertised no fees. The buyer pays us, but as they mentioned, the incentives of the buy side brokers like that is to do it for as low amount of money for the buyer as possible. So I think that if you're a business owner and you want to sell the business, it makes sense to go to a sell side brokerage because since we work via commission, um, mm, for the majority of our compensations, our incentives as a sell side broker are aligned with what you're wanting to do, which is sell for the most amount of money possible.
But wait a minute. How is it any different than like a real estate agent, right? Real estate agents they represent both sides, right? You never hear of a real estate agent, even though I know real estate agents always prefer to do listings because it's less work. But you never hear of real estate agents who say, I only do listings or I only represent buyers. Real estate agents by default do both, but yet the same thing applies for them, right? When they're representing the seller, they want to get the highest commission, or they want to get the highest price possible. When they represent the buyer, they're trying to get the lowest price possible. So the same argument applies to a real estate agent, but they do both and they don't seem to have a conflict of interest. Why can't the same thing happen in the big business brokerage world?
It is a great point. I think this is actually one of the key distinctions that differentiate M&A to real estate. So, real estate is a totally different type of asset. You can walk through it, you can touch the walls, you can look at the square footage, you can look at the comps. You can literally walk in and out, and it's a physical asset. And so, when you're dealing with a physical asset, the comps and the valuations are a little bit more straightforward. And when you're doing buy side versus sell side, there's less of a conflict of interest when it comes to real estate, which is why we deal with a lot of real estate agents just what we do because we have a lot of colleagues in the space. Real estate is a little bit friendlier when it comes to they do broker opens when they like have like an open house and they invite all these brokers to their open house because they have buy side clients. So it's a little different, whereas like co-brokering isn't really as common in M&A. I think that that's just because realistically in the M&A space, when you're focused on just on the sell side, there's a whole process that goes into that. And I think that it's less co-broke friendly. I mean, we do co-broke some deals, but I would say on a whole, co-broking in M&A is a lot less common than it is in real estate. Whereas you have like buy side and sell side coming together, it happens a lot less in M&A than it does in real estate.
That makes sense.
Right, real quick, if you run a home services company, you can download my free scripts for roofing, HVAC, and plumbing, like the actual scripts being used by the hundreds of agents across all the 75 plus call centers that we've built. Just click the link in the description and we'll send it to you right away. Okay, back to the podcast.
So talk to me about this. What do you think buyers are looking for when it comes to like a really good a good friendly transaction? What are they looking for?
So I think that the whole M&A space, in terms of what an ideal is, it all comes down to one word. Everything boils down to one word, and that is a risk. So at the end of the day, when someone acquires a business, they want to make a return on their investment in the lowest risk way possible. And actually, we were just talking about real estate. M&A, buying a business, is way riskier than buying real estate on a whole, which is why you see in real estate the multiples are so much higher in real estate than M&A. In M&A, it might be 3 to 5 to 6 times profit, whereas real estate is significantly beyond that. You have a mortgage and repayments over 30 years. And so, in M&A, it's about risk. And so what a buyer is really looking for is, how can I grow this asset, make a return on capital, make my money back, go beyond that in a way where it's the lowest risk as possible. And that's the whole reason that they do a whole level of due diligence. That's why it takes them so long to find a deal. And so I think it really all comes to that risk, down to that risk term.
That makes sense. What do you think are the best practices that business owners should do to prepare their business for sale? We all know the obvious ones, right? Get your books in order, de-risk it, owner dependency, the usual stuff. So, what do you think are some of the things that maybe owners forget about?
So aside from the ones that you mentioned, owner dependency, getting books in order, and de-risking the transaction, I would say, and this is different at different levels, but generally speaking, having documented SOPs and having
Yeah.
system processes be well structured and be repeatable and be visually accessible. I think that it's very easy when it comes to running a business to have some things like be in your head as the owner or just like be something that you personally understand. But I think that it's a unique skill set to take all those operations, put it in a flow chart, make every single system identifiable, repeatable, predictable, as predictable as you can get, as dynamic of a situation of running a business is. I think that's probably the biggest one. And the reality is that if you want to survive due diligence and sell, you're gonna have they're gonna look at all those systems with a fine-tooth comb and make sure that they have them put together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Let me ask you this. So this is a little spicy. Hey, if you want Scalify to help you build out a fully managed outbound call center for you so you can have a team of people booking in home appointments for you, check the link in the description and book a call with my team today. Now, keep in mind, we only build one call center per market, per industry. So don't sleep on this, or we'll probably just end up helping your competition. And I'm betting you wouldn't like that too much. All right, back to the podcast. Now, you specifically wanted to call out brokers who inflate valuations just to win the listing, and then they let the market kind of beat the sellers down. So, like, walk me through exactly like how that scam works, so my listeners kind of know what sort of red flag to sort of look out for.
This is so common and it's so frustrating. And because so again, so my job at our firm is I'm the first person you talk to when you're looking to sell a business. And b- I think that first of all, there's very little inventory on the market in terms of like sellable deals, right?
Mm.
So you know, the data is that like 20% of businesses that are listed sell. We sell 75% of ours, and that's because we do accurate valuation assessments and we manage expectations well. Um, and I think that the reason that brokers inflate valuations is because it's a sales, excuse me, tactic to win a listing. I think that happens in real estate too. I'm not as hip to real estate, but I think that when you're a smaller, either solopreneur broker or you're a smaller firm who doesn't have the established, marketing arm that a larger firm like us does, you're going to do whatever it takes to get that listing. And I think that, that's just their edge. There was a deal, which I can't get too much into specifics, where, the seller came to us stating a certain EBITDA. We deep dived their financials and found out it was much less. They end up going to a different broker who just agreed with the seller, told them what they wanted to hear. 6 months later, the business still hadn't sold, and they did a massive price reduction to like more than the levels that we have stated originally. And so, to the broker's credit, they got the listing and now they're going to sell it for a lower amount. But it's just an ethical issue, and one that's very common that brokers use as like a scale stat. I wouldn't call it a scam per se, but it's just deeply unethical,
Hmm.
and it's very common.
Yeah, I would imagine real estate agents probably do that too. Oh,
Yeah,
we'll sell your house for 10% over asking price. Just sign here.
very
Yeah,
common.
I'm sure
Yeah.
that kind of shit happens all the time. But you see it happen on the you see it happen with potential buyers too, right? Potential buyers do something similar, right? Where they say yes to whatever the opening price is, and then they just drag it out and hope that buyers fatigue, and then they come in and start chipping away at the price later on. When the seller is just completely exhausted. Tell listeners about that. Like, how does that game work?
So I see this a lot because very often when an owner speaks to me, they will have had a offer from a buyer that they were entertaining. And it's very common for buyers to offer you a really high amount, issue the LOI, talk a big game, when in reality, their game plan is to get you into due diligence and beat you down to a lower valuation. I think, just because someone submits an LOI or submits an offer does not mean it's going to close.
Yeah.
That's the key. An offer is not a closed deal. And it's funny, in a lot of conversations I have, people will take one of those offers that didn't close in the past. Like, well, I got an offer for this amount, so it must be worth that much. I'm like, not in any way, shape, or form. And it can be challenging because once someone submits an offer, it's very real, it's very emotional, it's very exciting, but that offer didn't close for a reason. And it's very common for buyers to inflate that offer because they want to get you in exclusivity so that they can negotiate and get you under in the lower amount. It's actually a very similar strategy, just a different framework.
Do sellers have to take exclusivity? Can they opt not to? Is that optional? Do they have to? Like, is there a law that says you enter into an exclusive relationship with that seller or with that buyer?
There's no law. I would say it is so in terms of the overall business selling process for anyone who's
Okay,
listening to me.
let me just pause you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. Why can't, as a seller, you just put your foot down and be ballsy and just be like, I know what I'm worth. I know I've got a great offer. Assuming you do, right? I know I've got a great business here. There's no way I'm going to shut this thing off to the open marketplace. So I'm just, in the spirit of honesty here, like I'm fielding multiple offers, so I'm not doing exclusive anything. So
So the reality is, if you work with a broker like us, there's a few key reasons why exclusivity is a positive thing when in the right context. And so, generally speaking, in terms of the process, we go to market, we entertain offers, we choose between a couple key offers, we go under exclusivity, under LOI, and then due diligence and then close. That's like the overall process. And then so when we put the business on the market, our a key part of a brokerage like us value is they're assessing the highest and best outcome from jump. So if you get an offer that's really attractive at that amount, you're not going to do better than that because you vetted that up front.
Mhm.
And that's where having a valuation that's accurate up front is really valuable because you know that if you get five people offering you all cash, 5 million bucks, and that's the best outcome, then going into exclusivity doesn't really have much downside because it just means that you show good faith to the buyer and that you want to work with them. The buyer shows that they're committed to you. You can enter due diligence without being complicating other parties, which reality is if it's a legit offer at the highest and best outcome, you don't want to do it with multiple parties from that can get very messy and that can have a conflict of interest pretty quickly.
what level of what market level is FBX brokers at? Like lower market, middle market? What's the average sale price or buy price rather than what you guys are for the average person you're dealing with, company you're dealing with?
So I would say, most of our deals range from like 1 to 20 million dollars. We do some deals, 50 to 100 million. And we do some smaller that some of our, brokers do like smaller, like silent fee deals. I would say like the range, our average, like our everyday is like 1 to 20 million dollars in valuation, which by the way, already toes the line. Like 5 million and under is SBA. 5 million, anything above 5 million is mostly going to be like private equity or like a institutional type of buyer because it goes beyond SBA financing. I would say an
Mhm.
average is like 1 to 20 is our sweet spot with some like, a couple of deals a year between like 50 and 100, and then a pretty decent amount lower than that.
So I'm familiar with this, but I think a lot of people in the audience probably are not. So a business that's under 5 million bucks can be acquired through SBA, through an SBA loan, right? SBA will finance up to five. They won't go beyond 5 million, period, or just a higher down payment.
So the SBA has a special type of loan called para pursue where they can go above 5 million. It's the special type of underwriting. I'm not as familiar with that. I know that generally speaking, if 5 million or under, they also just recently released terms where like you can also do like an asset loan in addition to a regular loan and go beyond 5 million. But without getting into the nitty gritty, for all intents and purposes, yes, so 5 million under is an SBA, and typically for equity injection in that, you need like 10% down and
Mhm.
you need like some money for like diligence and closing, all that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, 5 million or under is SBA territory. Yeah.
Okay. I know people are going to want to know the answer to this, and I ask this a lot. Explain to the audience what is the difference between a business broker, an M&A advisor, an investment banker.
So um I would say investment bankers typically do deals like over 100 million, maybe like more like 150 to 200 million. Some investment bankers go as low as, 30 to 40 million, but generally speaking, they're doing larger transactions. You know, we we do some 50 to 100 million dollar deals, but that's more their everyday and they're more equipped to do a higher volume of those. In terms of M&A advisor and broker, really what I've seen is those terms are pretty interchangeable. I would say, if I had to nitpick, M&A advisor is is has the nuance that maybe a broker doesn't have. They can do larger transactions in that like 1 to 20 million dollar range, whereas brokers maybe do lower. But I don't think that it's as important a distinction where like a broker is lesser than an M&A advisor or anything like that. I think that generally speaking, I've seen those two terms interchangeable, and that's when banking generally does like over $100 million deals pretty routinely, and that's the key difference.
Yeah. So here, we were just talking about real estate agents a minute ago, and of course, a lot of and don't shoot me, real estate agents, for saying this out loud, but putting you guys on the spot right now because I know a lot of real estate agents, they don't want to represent buyers because they don't want to be driving Mrs. Jones around, every neighborhood, God's green earth, showing her at every single house while having her nitpick everything apart, right? Until she finally settles on a house. They'd much rather just take on sellers, right? Sit back and throw it on the market and collect their commission check. Is that true? Basically, the same basic thing kind of true in the M&A world?
I would say, unfortunately, first of all, buy side brokers are a lot less common. Um, so generally speaking, the buy side space in M&A right now is still a lot of like coaching programs, less so like I am a buy side broker. I think that when you have a buy side broker, typically they're representing like a family office or a private equity firm where they're like spearheading their mandate. That's a little bit of a different type of situation. And that is a lot less like messy and a lot more, I think, viable. And we do handle those sometimes and work alongside them. But like I think that I think that there I think that unfortunately the buy side space, aside from like M&A advisors who represent like really big firms, generally speaking, it's a lot of like seller financing, no money down guru type stuff, unfortunately. And so
Hmm.
there's just not a lot of positivity associated with that space. I will say I do know of a couple of those coaching programs where it's actually pretty strong. They are doing proper like 10% down, money up front type of deals. But there's a lot of like sort of less than desirable actors in the buy side space, which is why I think a lot of people tend to stray away from doing work there.
So then, what about what about the Cody Sanchez's of the world and the Roland Frazier's of the world out there hawking this zero money down, buy businesses for nothing, type program? What do you have to say about that kind of stuff?
I laugh because this is such a we talk about this all the time.
Uh-huh.
I never want to bash someone else's living. I'm very careful about that because everyone has their own thing. But the reality is that like if a business is super sellable and attractive and a good deal, why would they not want money up front from a really great buyer? Like, why would they not want that? And so I think that unfortunately, a lot of those type of coaching programs are taking a small subsection of successful transactions, very small, and marketing it to a wide audience
Hmm.
for upfront coaching fees. And a lot of their students aren't successful. A lot of the deals that close are questionable deals. And I think that it's just it's a little scammy and it's a little bit unreal. It's a lot unrealistic, and it just is not how like no seller that I speak to is like, yeah, you know what? I want to get paid over 10 years and I don't want to make any money right now. Like no one's ever said that to me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I talk to a lot of people, and so I just think that it's just not to be respectful in how I talk about it. I don't think it's very realistic.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not the first person to say that. All right, with 125 closings a year, you've seen hundreds of deals die on the table. So walk me through the most common deal killer after a buyer shows serious interest and what sellers can do right now to prevent that sort of thing.
So what makes or breaks most transactions is due diligence. So due diligence is the period where you're in exclusivity with buyer, you've accepted a potential initial offer, they go under LOI, and you're in due diligence right now. You know, we sell 75% of our deals for a reason. That is that when we vet them upfront and choose the valuation. And when we find the buyer, we know it's very likely that it's going to close because we make a commission. So it doesn't serve us if it just dies. One in four deals that we take on don't sell. I think that the reason that they don't sell is a couple of different reasons. One is that there's a major market downturn or the business like falls off a cliff. So I think that when you're in the selling process, to keep your foot on the gas pedal and not like lean out and not let up. And that's one reason that it dies. Like suddenly their P&L shows like half of what they were making the prior six months. That's a really big reason. Two is that, something comes up in due diligence, like a major discrepancy in their revenue, or and a key employee suddenly says that they don't want to stay on, or something along those lines. So I think that the way to avoid a deal falling through, it really comes down to keeping your foot on the gas pedal throughout the entire selling process, and making sure that the stability that has been the bread and butter of your business for this amount of time stays in place. And so I think that when people just like say, okay, I'm done, as soon as they get that offer, that's what kills a pretty huge amount of deals, because they just like mentally check out. And I think that's probably the biggest deal killer that we see.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. Now, you believe that valuations should never be free because a real one takes days of deep analysis, but most brokers seem to offer them for free, some sort of like a lead magnet. So, walk me through why that model is broken and what a business owner should expect from like a legitimate valuation.
So when you do a valuation, you take the P&L, balance sheet, and tax returns, you deep dive every single line item, and the analysis is like a due diligence level analysis. That's like a true valuation. We actually do offer a free valuation via a resource that we deep programmed with AI. It has like 90,000 market comps in it. It has like 20 questions, has a bunch of levers we pull. And I would argue that our free valuation tool is as good as any free valuation that a broker does. If any broker like turns around a valuation in like 24 hours and says, yeah, I look things over toward this amount, it's like a huge red flag, because the proper valuation takes many hours of time. On average, ours takes probably around 11 to 12 days. Obviously, we're not like morning to evening looking at just that valuation, but in terms of like putting aside a time, it takes hours to really vet it. And I think that that's why so many deals die, and why the industry average of only 20% of listed businesses actually sell, is because up front there wasn't a true level of vetting to make sure that it would actually sell. I think that it's easy to give a free valuation, be like, yeah, it's worth this, and I ballparked it. It'll probably be around this in the market. Like, I think a calculator like we have can do that. Like, you don't need a broker to do that for you. So I think that charging for evaluations, I mean, the simple reason that we charge for them is because if we spend 10 days doing evaluation, and then we present that number to you, like, that's interesting, but I kind of changed my mind. I don't want to sell. Well, then we're not out like, days of labor, and we kind of cover ourselves a little bit, because at volume, if we do all these free valuations and they decide not to list, it's unsustainable for any reasonably sized firm.
No, that makes perfect sense. All right, if a listener owns a business doing $1 million or $2 in revenue and they think they may want to sell in the next 2 or 3 years, walk me through the exact steps that they should start taking this month to maximize their exit price.
So, I used to own a business in the music industry that I shut down when COVID hit. But knowing now what I do now, which I didn't know then, is that I think around 2 years before you want to sell, you want to get a valuation, like a real valuation, not like a free valuation off the cuff valuation, but 2 years before sell, you want to get a valuation. And when you do that valuation, it should be a discussion of, where am I now? What do I need to put in place to get to where I want to be? What are the projections like? What tweaks can I make in the business to make it more sellable, so that a year from now when I do evaluation again, I'm in good shape. So a couple of key things that owners can do like 2 years in advance, which you already aptly mentioned earlier. One is, whatever your scope is in the business, identify it, document it, ask yourself how many hours you are doing it, and be clear that any new owner who comes on is going to have to step into that scope. Um, and then along those lines, delegating out those things to other team members to reduce that new owner scope will make the business more valuable. The reality is that the single most profitable thing any business owner can do when they want to sell make it so that they have to do less stuff in the business. Getting it close or as close to that owner absentee designation as possible. And I think that it's honestly, especially for deals like under 500K in net profit, maybe 400K net profit. I think it's unrealistic to say like, okay, it's going to be total passive, like no owner involvement whatsoever. But making it so that the owner can work on the business and less so in the business is probably the single most needle mover, and everything you do can be centered around that one, task.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So I'm Joe Business Seller. I want to sell my business and I go to a broker and that broker wants to charge me an upfront fee to start the process. Does that scream scam to you?
Um, I think that charging for the valuation definitely is not a scam. I mean, I think that it's no less of a red flag than it is like someone inflating the valuation up front and saying that you're a 500K net profit business is worth like $6 million. So I think that the reality is that as business brokers scale and get more volume, like we have, I think they will learn that doing free valuations just is not sustainable because of the sheer volume of them. And so I definitely don't think it's a scam. I think that when you vet a broker, asking them, how many deals do you do per year? What is your track record? Do you have case studies? All those things, that's like the key thing you want to do whenever you hire a broker. And that's why when like I talk to someone new, I send them a couple case studies of our firm and I show them like, hey, these are some example closed deals that we've done recently. And these are the two managing partners track records. This is what we've done so far, just to kind of like separate us from the noise. But I don't think it's a scam. I think that the reality is that it's the 80/20 rule where 20% of brokers are closing like 80% of deals. And so you want to isolate those 20% that are closing the 80%. And then once you find that, I think that should be your vetting process. I don't think charging up front is a scam at all.
Okay. What are the various costs that a business owner should prepare for when it comes time to selling? So break them down for me in the proximate costs for each, whether it's like, tax advice, legal advice, so on and so forth.
The two main expenses that come up on the sales side when it comes to selling the business. One is your accountant having to provide financials and work through documents with you. And two is your attorney to vet the different agreements that come up in the process, like the LOI, like the purchase agreement. Um, I would say, I haven't checked on, because I work mostly up front. I'm not the actual broker who closes the deals. I'm not so sure what like the trending costs are right now. I'm assuming, an attorney is going to cost around 10 grand, 5 grand, 10 grand, somewhere on those lines to look at all the agreements. The accountant maybe costs like a few grand. I would say, setting aside maybe like 10 to 15K for the whole process is probably more than enough, if not too, like overshooting it a little bit.
Hmm.
I think that when it comes to the CPA, they have to field documents. They may have to work with the buyer to validate anything in the books and answer any questions. And the attorney has a couple key contracts that they look at. Look at the LOI, they look at the purchase agreement. They look at any other like operating agreements or anything like that. And so whatever they charge, I think that probably like 10, 15K set aside is probably a good amount.
Fair enough. All right, let's switch gears and start moving over to the formula related questions. Right, the name of the show is called our formula. It's about all the different things that you do that really make a difference for you financially. So, who's a mentor or a coach that's actually moved the needle for you?
So the way I got into this firm was by meeting one of the managing partners. And I was out on my own. It was 2023 and I was on my own in M&A in 2022 and didn't get much traction. In 2023, I closed my first deal on my own, with a couple people who I tacked on to help me. And generally speaking, I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was very overwhelmed, and I wanted to learn and be mentored, and so I messaged um my now boss. I said, "Hey, I'm brand new to the space. Can you mentor me?" And he hired me a month later, and that has been probably the most profound moment in my personal career, is being hired by him in this firm. And
Mhm.
both him and the other managing partner had just invested countless hours into me and my education and my training. And so I would say between them two, the one who hired me, his name is Jason. Jason has been with me all on my side all these years, has mentored me the whole way. And he was voted one of the top producing brokers on the East Coast. And then Herb, the other owner, who I got to know a little bit more later on, also has mentored me a great deal. So I would say between the two of them, you know, I would call them, even though they are technically my boss as the owners of the firm, I would say their mentor is just the same, and it's amazing how much I get to learn on a day-to-day basis. I think the most fun part about my job is how much I get to learn. It's just so fun and so interesting. Like, and I think that it's been very humbling to me how much, like, the more I learn, the less I think I know. It's a very strange dynamic for me.
Yeah.
But and that it sometimes it scares the shit out of me. But like the more I'm mentored by both Herb and Jason, the the more my imposter syndrome kicks up. It's like, do I know anything? So I think that like mentor wise, both of them are the two big needle movers for me.
That's great. Is there a specific book that's maybe changed how you think about money or success?
What do you think about that? So there's a really good book called Spin Selling. It's a sales book, and what I love about that book is that it gets into communication strategies and sales for like higher ticket, high level stuff. And it goes into like leading with value and having a consultative approach. And that was a really big needle mover for me. Just because it reframed my communication strategies as being more value driven and less like closing and more just like good customer service. And I think that Spin Selling is probably my favorite book of all time. It really gets into that more like B2B high level sales that really move the needle for me.
Love it. All right. Everybody wants to be in the right rooms and wants to level up. So, what networking groups or masterminds do you belong to?
So, it's interesting. I'm not a part of any masterminds or networking groups right now. Really, like 100% of my focus is being mentored by the two managing partners of our firm. That's like a
Mhm.
daily that's like a daily thing for me. Where I'm just like soaking up as much information as possible. And I'm reading a lot of like, every day I read through various articles about M&A. I kind of like my general mindset, that just how I operate, is that my primary goal is just to learn as much as possible. The making money is like great and I love it. It gives me options, but like the way I approach, like even though I'm not in any masterminds or anything like that, being mentored and learning as much as possible is just kind of how I like in any given moment in my day. I'm like, how can I learn as much as possible for like the next hour? Asking questions to sellers whenever I speak to them, learning about their business, asking questions to my mentors, talking to the brokers on our team who broker the deal, asking about the transactions. I'm just in like a information soak up mode. And so that's how I operate. I don't do any like masterminds or anything like that. I just am the circle I'm in, the room I'm in, which took me a while to get into. I'm just surrounded by people who know more than I do, and I'm just soaking up as much information as I can every single day. That's kind of how I do it.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. What's your most, let's switch gears. Let's go to the lightning round. All right. All right.
Okay.
If you want to skip any questions, just say skip. Okay. What's your most embarrassing business failure that you can laugh about now?
So my first business was a music education business. It was basically a music school, and I shut that down when COVID hit. It was the whole business model was I sent music teachers to the homes of families to teach lessons, and
Mhm.
COVID hit, and we pivoted online because we couldn't do anything in person. And then by the time things opened up again, none of our teachers wanted to teach in person anymore.
Mhm.
And I think that I I should have ran that business much more. I think that my mistake running that business was I tried to make it owner absentee too early. And so
Mhm.
that was my biggest failure. Aside from not navigating the COVID situation well, which is just I wasn't, I just didn't I thought online was going to be there to stay. But I think, and this is relevant to our discussions, when you have a business that really relies on you as an owner and you step away too quickly, too fast, that can be like a kiss of death to that business. And I think that my biggest failure was with that business leaning out too hard, too fast, too quickly, and not giving it the life force from my mental energy that I really needed. I think that's probably my biggest failure as a business wife.
Okay. What's your guilty pleasure that would surprise your followers?
I don't think I don't think this is that surprising, but like I live in New York. Our firm is headquartered in Florida, but I live in New York. And my guilty pleasure is pizza, man. I just love my
Okay.
pizza.
Okay.
I just I'm having it tonight, which is like total coincidence. But like for me, when I've had like a tough day of calls and things weren't going as I wanted to, like just like a nice pepperoni slice, like that is my guilty pleasure. Like
That's nice. Good. Good. Can't argue with that.
and as someone who lives in New York, we have really good pizza, and
Yeah.
I've lived here for 27 years, still haven't gotten tired of it. So like when and so today, for example, I had like some calls didn't go as I wanted them to, and so I was like, you know what, I'm having a pepperoni pie tonight. I texted my wife, so that is
Yeah.
that could be my
I,
guilty pleasure.
I spent a lot of time in New York, and I definitely agree with you because the pizza in Denver, there's nothing that's even close. Not
Oh
not
god,
even. I can't
sorry.
find a single. I can't find a single place that's even close. Not one.
No, you
So
can't.
yeah, I hear you. All right. What's the dumbest thing you've ever spent money on?
I'm thinking about. Give me a second. I'm gonna think about it.
Okay.
So I was getting a I was getting like an energy slump at like 2 or 3 p.m. And I found that if I had like a little bit of nuts in at that time, it perked me up. So I went on Amazon and I bought like a lifetime supply worth of like little nut packets, which are still sitting there right about there right now. So like I have like probably like 500 nut packets. And then I realized that just having a cup of coffee achieved the same thing. And so I literally have in my office a giant duffel bag worth of nuts that I purchase, which are just like burning a hole on my back table there. That's
I'm sure
probably
there's a.
that's probably the dumbest thing I've ever spent my money on.
I'm sure there's a homeless shelter somewhere that'll take them off your hands. All right. What's the best personal item that you've ever spent money on?
My wife's wedding ring.
That's a good one. All right. You've seen the financials of hundreds of businesses. What's the weirdest thing a business owner has ever tried to expense before a sale?
One tried to expense like an all inclusive like vacation just as like it was like a work trip. I'm like, there's nothing work about this. You went to Barbados and like party for like 10 days. Like that's not gonna be an add back. So like and
Yeah.
that fact it's actually pretty common. Like people get pretty like aggressive when it comes to like, deductions. I'm like, you went to like Mexico for like 20 days and like went on a yacht, like that's not gonna that's not gonna really
Yeah.
that's not gonna work out.
All right. You've seen hundreds of deals pass across your desk. So what type of business do you secretly wish you owned yourself?
Personally, I would love to run a landscaping business. That's
Why?
that. So like landscaping, when you get those maintenance contracts to like service someone's lawn over and over again, it pays so well and is so recurring that it's just such a good business model. And I think that if I were to ever run my own business, just having that like sticky customer base that there's a repeat over and over again. I personally love looking at like a really well done lawn. Unfortunately, I rent right now, but when I do eventually buy a house, like you better believe I'm gonna have the most immaculate like front area. And I think that and actually the multiples for landscaping maintenance agreements are like through the roof. We're talking like
Mm.
6, 7, 8x, like really, really high once you get like $1 million in EBITDA. So I happen to have a sweet spot, a special place in my heart for like a landscaping company. I probably want to own one of those.
That's great. Well, Joey, it was a pleasure having you on today. How do people find you online?
So, you can, I think Facebook is a really good place to find me. I'm pretty active on there. So facebook.com/Joey Lieber. There's also that free valuation that I mentioned. You don't have to go to a broker for that. We have a resource for it. It takes 10 minutes. So that is calculator.fbxbrokers.com. And you can find out how much your business is worth. That's our free valuation, and that's what we operate. So if you do want that without all the financial and all that stuff, so I would say those two places are the best place to find me online, and I pretty much catch most things on Facebook, so I'm pretty active on there.
It's great. Joey, it was great having you on today.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, listeners, we'll all see you guys next time. Have a great rest of your day, guys. Cool. All right, man. We got it. Let me stop this recording.